The Two Faces of the Shadow. My name is alias Baruch. I am neither a citizen of Rome nor a servant of Persia. I am merely a wanderer, raised upon the roads molded by sand and silence. My father was a Syrian potter, my mother a concubine brought from Ecbatana. That is why no language feels foreign to me, and no god is entirely distant. I have prayed in the stone temples of Rome and in the fire towers of Persia. Yet I believed in neither, for faith itself is born from fear, and fear always grows from the same soil. It was the year 260. The cities along the Euphrates were burned, the bridges collapsed. Rome's legions had scattered. Persia's cavalry had covered the sky with dust from east to west. In those days I carried goods, linen, wine, papyrus, and sometimes philosophy books. But there was no trade anymore. Every caravanserai had turned into a prison. People no longer spoke of sides in the war. They spoke only of the next day. For war kills not a man's side, but his voice. One night near Harran I sat by the same fire as a group of Persian soldiers. A young officer loosened his armor, looked at me and asked, "Why does Rome always fight, stranger? Have your gods never grown weary?" I smiled. "Perhaps it is not the gods who tire," I said, "but the kings who do not." The young man laughed. "It is the same with us." Ahura Mazda sometimes struggles to keep up with Shapur. He threw a stone into the fire. It hissed and cracked. I listened to that sound, for it was the echo of two empires breaking apart. A month later I reached Gundashapur. There the rumors had grown. The Roman Emperor Valerian had been captured by the Persian king Shapur II. People spoke of it in whispers, as if uttering it too loudly might summon divine punishment. The fall of an emperor was equal to the silence of the gods. Before the palace, thousands of Persian soldiers stood in rows. The sun shimmered upon their bronze armor. I stood behind the crowd watching the strangest scene in history. Valerian was in chains. His eyes were dry, his lips cracked. Shapur sat upon his horse, his silver armor gleaming. The crowd fell silent. The king dismounted and approached his captive. For a moment he studied him. "Where is your kingdom now, Roman?" he asked. "Have your gods forsaken you?" Valerian did not answer. Perhaps words had finally lost their power. Shapur bowed his head slightly. In that instant, I saw the same thing in both faces, one bound by chains, the other bound by a throne. There was no difference. Both were prisoners of their own power. Weeks later, I found work in the royal library, for I spoke Greek. Shapur was a wise king. Even amid war, he had a hunger for knowledge and philosophy. One day he summoned me. Before him lay open scrolls, covered in drawings of stars and ancient texts. "Translate this," he said. On the parchment were two words, Panta Rei. "Everything flows," I said. Shapur smiled. "Everything flows. Yet why do empires freeze, alias? Why do men stack stone upon stone, knowing the wind will claim them all?" I could not answer. For the weight of that question, spoken by a king, was heavier than the sum of all philosophies. In that moment, I realized wisdom sometimes echoes in the hearts of the mighty, but it never stays there for long. To the north of the palace, Roman prisoners were made to labor. Among them was an old man who drew my attention. His name was Lucius Crispus. He had once been a philosopher, perhaps trained in Athens. Despite his chains, he walked upright. "We are no longer warriors," he told me, "but we can still think. Rome was not built by stones, but by thoughts. And thoughts know no chains. We spoke for days. At night, beneath the desert winds, we talked of Aristotle, Zoroaster, even the Buddha. One evening, as Shapur's chariot passed by, Lucius bowed his head and whispered, 'Look, gods change. But the chains remain the same.' Those words etched themselves into my heart. When Shapur called for me again, the air in his chamber was heavy. Weariness filled his eyes. "Why does Rome fall, merchant?" he asked. "It collapses, and yet it always returns. I am building a kingdom, and even the wind refuses to respect my walls." I thought for a moment and said, "Rome does not fall, Majesty. It merely sheds its skin. It was once Etruscan, then Latin. Today it is Rome. Tomorrow perhaps it will be Persia." Shapur laughed, though the laughter quickly faded. Persia become Rome? Impossible. You already have, I said. You no longer fight to conquer, but to preserve. That was Rome's disease, and now it has reached you. He grew silent. Then he whispered, perhaps we no longer win. We merely endure. In that moment I saw the emptiness within a ruler's heart. Power exalts a man, but without meaning, it devours him from within. Time passed. Valerian still lived. Some claimed to have seen him hauling stones. Others said Shapur used him as a human step when mounting his horse. Perhaps true, perhaps not. But rumor is the shadow of truth, and mankind always remembers the shadow, not the source. One morning they found Lucius dead in the garden. In his hand was a clay tablet. Upon it 3 words were carved. Quis visit? Who won? No one answered. No one ever could. For that question would echo through every age. That night I copied the tablet and left it on Shapur's desk. When he saw it, he stared for a long time before saying softly, some questions are crimes to answer. And I replied, some answers are reasons for new wars. Years later, as Shapur's army marched south, I used the chaos to flee north, across the mountains. Beyond the Euphrates, the empires I left behind had turned to dust. I settled in a small village where no one had heard of Rome or Persia. The people there worshipped the sunrise and whispered to the stars at night. One day a child asked me, Uncle, why do men fight? I told him, because those who cannot see their own shadow believe they are the sun. The boy did not understand, but he smiled, and for the first time in years, I felt peace. Time forgot me. My hair turned white, my hands trembled. Yet sometimes in dreams I still see Shapur. He sits upon his throne holding the old parchment. He turns to me and says, everything flows. Then he asks, but what happens when the river runs dry? Each time I fail to answer. Perhaps there is no answer. For the river never ends. It merely changes its course. Humanity is the same. Rome becomes Persia, then turns to ash, yet the flow continues. One day a priest came to me. We have read your letters, he said. You told the story of 2 emperors. Which one was right? I smiled. Neither, I said, because war does not decide who is right, only who remains. The priest fell silent. I added, Shapur and Valerian looked into the same mirror. One saw his reflection and called it God. The other saw his shadow and called it fate. I saw only the dust between them. Now as I write these words, I sit by the banks of the Euphrates. The setting sun turns the river into gold. In the distance, half buried in sand, lies an old Roman helmet. Beside it, a broken Persian sword. The wind caresses them both with the same voice, and I understand. Even the gods forget, but stories never do. Because stories are how man deceives himself, and how he redeems himself. Neither Rome won nor Persia, only time won, and time makes peace with no one. I, Aelius Baruch, am no longer a merchant. I am only a shadow that writes what it has seen. The shadow has 2 faces, one that looks toward light, and one that turns toward darkness. I have seen them both, and in the end, I learned, the meaning of light lies not in being without shadow, but in existing with it.